Good morning, Chairman Shapiro, Chairman Caligiuri, Ranking Member Whitcoast, and members of the General Law Committee. For the record, my name is Sam Caligiuri. I'm a state senator from the 16th Senatorial District, and I'm here this morning to speak in favor of Senate Bill 324, an act concerning the mandatory licensing and oversight of trash haulers. And let me begin by thanking you very much for taking the time to raise this for the hearing. I appreciate very much the opportunity to have an exchange of ideas on what I think is a very important issue for consumers in the state of Connecticut. I believe that we need this bill in order to protect the public and consumers from the small minority of haulers in this industry who are engaged in illegal practices. We know from various law enforcement sources that organized crime has infiltrated certain segments of this industry, and that this element has encouraged practices that are anti-competitive, which ultimately hurts consumers. I believe that an appropriate system of oversight would make it much more difficult for this type of illegal activity to occur. Therefore, I would recommend the following. First, that the Department of Consumer Protection license every trash hauler. Number two, that every applicant for a license would have to provide background information on its officers, directors, shareholders, and other owners of that applicant company. Three, the Department of Consumer Protection would conduct background checks on these individuals. Four, trash haulers would be required to submit annual financial statements to the Department of Consumer Protection. For larger companies, these financial statements would have to be audited. For smaller companies, they would have to be accompanied by an affidavit as to their accuracy, completeness, and truthfulness. Trash haulers, finally, would be required to certify to the areas, geographic areas, that are served by their companies. In my opinion, this regulatory scheme would help eliminate the problems that we've seen in a number of different ways. First, the licensing and background check process would help us to identify key players or prospective players in the trash hauling industry who, by virtue of their background, should not be permitted to participate in this marketplace in Connecticut. For example, we know that 2 individuals convicted in related schemes over the last several years were owners or partners in as many as 25 different trash hauling companies. The requirement that haulers submit certified financial statements will help create greater transparency and hopefully deter the illegal practices that we've learned of. May I continue briefly?
Yeah, please do so, but summarize.
Yes, thank you. Briefly, we know from law enforcement that payments were made by companies to individuals associated with organized crime. We also know that providing financial statements would help us to identify evidence of so-called property rights system, pursuant to which participating haulers agreed to divide stops, fix prices, and rig contract bids. The requirement that haulers describe the areas served would also make it easier for us to identify a potential property rights scheme in place. I know that opponents will tell you that this law isn't required because the industry is already regulated at the local level. I would contend that what we know has already occurred illegally is evidence that the oversight isn't adequate. And finally, I know that opponents will tell you that this will place an undue burden on the industry. And my contention to the chairs and to the committee is that the benefit to consumers would greatly outweigh what I think is a relatively small additional burden that companies in this line of work would have to incur. So for those reasons, I thank you again for hearing the bill, and I'd be delighted to take any questions that you might have.